And joining us is Piet Olafir. He's a legal researcher at the Helen Suzman Foundation. Alois Abaleni is a political analyst. Professor Barry Hanyan is a political analyst. Mzwanele Manyi is the founder and convener of Decolonization Foundation. And Gabelo Siabi is an attorney. We also hope to be joined by Francois Stoffberg, an economist with Efficient Group. To you, all of you gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Can we just start with, is this the beginning of trouble for Pravin Gordhan, in your view?
I suppose so, you could say so. But in any case, this was coming, isn't it? In the past few months, surely, we're not talking about speculations here. There were intentions on the part of the NPA to serve him and to see him in court. And finally, the day has come. Yeah.
So this also ventilates the conspiracy theories in the sense that Pravin Gordhan is very instrumental in the economy, and if anything were to happen to him, the rand would collapse, and with that, the economy as well. What do you think this process is likely to unveil, Mzwanele?
Yeah, look, I think for us in the foundation, we'll be very disappointed if the financial markets are going to pin the policy issues of the country on an individual. I think South Africa has been saying this over and over again, that in terms of our fiscal policy, where are we? In terms of our monetary policy, where are we? South Africa has got a very robust financial governance. We've got a very strong national treasury. We've got a very strong South African Reserve Bank. We've got a very strong financial services board. We've got a very strong banking industry. So our financials, in fact, we're amongst the best in the world. Now, to then try and say that destabilization of one individual can undermine the whole system, I think is an insult to the governance system of this country. So I think, if anything, the financial markets and everybody else should welcome the rule of law. It cannot be that we can have a South Africa where the rule of law, where constitutionality is subservient to whether the rent goes up or down. We cannot have that. The rule of law should always prevail. Constitutionality should always prevail. And the rating agencies need to understand that it is, in fact, in the interest of their investments when the country puts the rule of law and constitutionality above everything else.
Gabelo, you're also of the view that politics are overshadowing what essentially is a legal process.
Look, I'm not familiar with the contents of the docket that the NPA has. And I think it would not be befitting of me to say that there's a political motive on the steps taken by the NPA. But what the NPA has done by deciding that they have a case, a criminal case to be answered, and requiring that the Minister of Finance, Mr. Pillay and Mr. Magashula, should appear in court to answer that case. That is something that resides within the mandate that they have under the Constitution.
Okay, I'll pose that question to Piet Olafir, legal researcher at the Helen Suzman Foundation, whether you think that politics are overshadowing legal processes in this case.
Look, we at the HSF think that it is likely. The timing of the summons is strange, given that these charges seem to have been known to the Hawks and the NPA for quite a long time. And also the charges seem to be quite flimsy. In order for the NPA to succeed in its case, it's going to have to prove that the minister intended to defraud the Treasury and SARS, and that the Treasury and SARS was actually prejudiced by what was alleged to happen. And based on what we know now, this seems to be very unlikely. So yes, we would say that there do seem to be politics behind this.
And with the politics, it also creates suspicion and a narrative that there is something untoward. But Peter, you were saying that the National Prosecuting Authority would have to follow certain prescripts within the parameters of their mandate when they charge an individual. So if you say it's flimsy, let's get a response from Alois Baleni. What do you think with that, what Pete's suggesting, that it is flimsy, it is questionable, especially around the timing?
Thanks, Cindy, and good evening to all viewers at home. I think the question of timing is not a very important matter for me, because at the end of the day, if the date has been set that way, you will find that there is currently a public opinion or discourse that says, or there's a narrative rather that says the timing is not proper, it is incorrect. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the rule of law here. And if Gordhan has a case or he doesn't have, let him be tested. And then we get over it. So it's not a question of when timing is. At the end of the day, we need to be very clear the rule of law should be let to prevail. At the end of the day, that's what we're looking for in my view.
All right, let's get an economist point of view from the efficient group, Francois Stoffberg. On previous occasions, you'd said that the rand is undervalued anyway, and that there's other variables that impacts on the performance of the rand. Can we pin today's developments with the charging of finance minister on the performance of the currency?
Well, yes, in this isolated case, if we just look at today, it is quite a direct impact. As soon as the announcement was made, the rand already started depreciating, and then it just took wheels from there. But usually the domestic, you look at international and domestic occurrences that do have an impact on the rand. And yes, externally we've had a crisis and all this, but what we keep on saying is that other countries, other emerging countries, have been well able to fix themselves and their economies to grow quite substantially. But South Africa remains behind trend and any average that it has ever seen globally or locally, and that's why we ask that's why we keep on asking why, and then we've come to not the conclusion, and you can't just pin it on political uncertainty. There are many influencing factors in South Africa, but it does seem as though since the financial crisis we've had this persistent and consistent political uncertainty that brews policy uncertainty. And if you have this major sword that isn't aimed well and implemented as well as it can be, which is in the form of not only government finances but also state-owned enterprises, and we keep on talking about money that's being thrown into these state-owned enterprises, into all these various companies, and is not successfully implemented as it should have been. And then you have the sacking of Finance Minister Nene in December, and then you have the president making announcements in Davos last year, saying that, or first saying at the State of the Nations address that we want foreigners to come and invest in South Africa, but then at the State of the Nations making the comment that they do not want foreigners to own property in South Africa. And that's the kind of political impartation that I believe that the rest of the world is growing tired of. And now once again we have the comments or the suggestion that the finance minister is not due for his position, and I think the rest of the world is getting tired of that, and that's why we're seeing the rand impact.
Let's get a response from our panelists whether this is real or perceived concerns around policy change. As you were saying, that the fiscal and the monetary policy systems are world-class, second to none, that if in the removal of a particular finance minister, the markets react in a particular way. Is it only about the individual, or is it other variables at play?
In fact, I think the mere fact that they're individualizing it actually compromises the minister. How? It compromises the minister because there is no individual in this country, first and foremost, that can change policy on your own. There's no super minister here that can change a policy on their own. There's all kinds of processes. Now, if you have a Minister of Gordhan himself has been on the pulpit platforms to give confidence that our policy framework is intact. President has spoken on this, the country has spoken on this. Now, the fact that they want to personalize this, it actually creates a suspicious situation to say, what is it that the minister can do outside policy that they're interested in, that they're not so sure if it does get removed, if at all that happens, whether the next person is going to do whatever it is. I think that on its own casts a very unhelpful suspicion, which shouldn't be. So we'd call upon these rating agencies and these markets to respect the rule of law, to respect that we've got policies here, to understand and accept that in South Africa, maybe in other countries it's different, in South Africa there is no minister that can change the policy single-handedly.
Yeah, but how do we ventilate the rhetoric? As you were saying, it's something that is etched in society, and if you were to read media reports already, there is a verdict even before the trial happens as to who is the protagonist here, who is the villain, who is being victimized, Kabelo. So how do we ventilate the rhetoric to make sense of it?
Look, Cindy, I think what is most important is that South African citizens and all our international friends should trust the process, or the judicial process that we have in this country. We have seen our judicial processes in play in certain high-profile cases lately. The Pistorius matter, which was played on TV. I think it is about time that we invest more trust in the systems that we have and the procedures we have in this country.
I think the confidence issue is very important, because if we also perpetuate the negativity or the narrative that there is corruption, especially when it comes to Chapter 9 institutions, be it just your concerns when it comes to the NPA, Sean Abrams reiterating the fact that this was an independent decision and they had to thoroughly go through the merits of the case before the charges were made. Do you have confidence in this?
Look, we're going to have to see what happens. I mean, Mr. Abrams has said that the process was free of political interference. We have to hope that it is. But given the seemed strength of the charges, we're not terribly confident that there is a terribly strong case against Mr. Gordhan. But it is correct, we're going to have to see what happens when the case eventually comes before the court.
Alois, I think the question I was asking Peter is the fact that there is no, or rather that the NPA had to re-emphasize the point that it is independent and that there is no political interference. It seems that it's a pill that some South Africans are not willing to swallow.
It seems that way. I think if there isn't political interference, it's good that it remains independent. But I think what is happening currently is not necessarily political interference, it's political response. They are talking about a politician here. There's no way the public is going to remain quiet. People, I mean, would talk about this thing. For me, that is a political response to what is happening currently. There is no way we can say that is political interference. We would want that system to be as independent as possible so that at the end of the day we see the end result. And if Minister Gordhan has any questions to answer, for me, I think he should go to the right place where the questions should be asked so that he answers.
Yeah, but he also made the comment that as South Africans, we need to ask ourselves who the hawks are serving. And so what do you read out of that?
In fact, I think this is why it's helpful to look at the statement by the African National Congress, where they've been calling on all affected parties not to make those kinds of statements, because you'll get another rebuff and then this thing is going to go wild. So I think we would call upon the minister to respect the position that the African National Congress has said, that the affected parties must hang ten, must not comment on the matter, let the processes to flow. I think for us, as well as the Decolonization Foundation, we're concerned about the Helen Suzman Foundation's issue about the timing. Our view is that if you begin to have issues around the timing, then you're actually politicizing the matter. The reason you had a problem with the Scorpions is all these political things. Sean Abrams was very clear in this presentation that people agonized over this to make sure that they don't fall into the same trap. They went through processes. When they were ready to prosecute like they're doing now, there was no political consideration. Even the meeting that he had with the minister was just to inform the minister that this is what we're going to do, didn't ask for permission. So therefore, I think for us, we take strong exception to a foundation that is going to make statements that are irresponsible, statements that continue to undermine and erode the dignity and integrity of our institutions. We really take a strong exception to what the Helen Suzman Foundation is saying.
Pete, did you get that?
Yeah, look, we at the Foundation don't agree that to point to evidence of politicization is in itself politicization. And I think we as South Africans live in a constitutional democracy. And when we see evidence of foul play, I think it's our right and our responsibility to point it out.
Okay, we've also seen just on the sidelines Julius Malema asking for South Africans to protest for the finance minister. Barry, your views on that?
Look, I find it difficult if we take a position that this should not be put in the public domain. For starters, you have a high-ranking public minister here who's caught up in a web of sorts. I don't see us avoiding a situation where we can't have a say either in public or elsewhere. This goes to say, General Holomisa has had a take earlier on. It's going to open up a can of worms. It's going to open up commentary in all sectors of society. I think it goes beyond parties, but also civil society as well. Helen Suzman Foundation taking a step, the Decolonization Foundation as well taking a step. It's difficult to contain it.
Yeah, but I think that's okay for everybody except for the affected parties. I think that's the issue here. For the affected parties, our view is the same as that of the ANC, to say that they must respect the integrity of the process, because it's almost like sub judice for them. So we can't have a situation where affected parties are now part and parcel of the discourse of us, who are just civil society. Civil society you can't stop, but affected parties must maintain their dignity and must cooperate with the process. So we call upon, in fact, we join the call to say all affected parties must cooperate with the system. In fact, they should say, if Julius is saying we must mobilize, they must say not in our name. Because if they keep quiet, they are collaborating with an irresponsible position, if that is a position. I haven't heard, but if this is what you're saying and I have no reason not to believe you, it's quite irresponsible. You cannot have a member of parliament that is going to mobilize society against rule of law. It's totally illegal what it's doing, so it should not be tolerated.
Kabelo, especially because we don't know how this particular story ends, in light of the court case only being on the 2nd of November, whether there has been political interference or whether there has been unfair or undue victimization on the part of the finance minister. All of that will come out during the court proceedings and lay this matter to rest. But in the bigger scheme of things, there's this big, the boogeyman that the economy is going to collapse. We have the ratings agencies breathing down our neck. The economy is sluggish. And there we go. It seems that the finance minister is unfairly treated.
I think the one thing that I can say for certain, and I'm sure that many people in this country believe that our judiciary is impartial. The NPA may believe that they have a case, but whatever they may hold, that will be tested in front of the judiciary. The decision is going to be made by an impartial presiding officer in court, and that is when all these facts will be ventilated in front of that presiding officer, and a decision will come. I'm sure that most of these comments will be appropriate at that stage. Once the facts have been tested in court and a decision has been made by the judiciary, I'm sure that all of us trust that the judiciary will do the correct thing, and they do not have any political motive.
Yeah, sorry, Kabelo, I believe we have a problem with your audio, so while our technical crew sorts that out. The Finance Minister also responded to the 27 questions sent by the Hawks that the Public Finance Management Act does not apply to him in his capacity as SARS Commissioner at the time. And it's now become evident that it does apply for him, or to him rather, in his capacity as finance minister, when he made the decision to approve Ivan Pilay's early retirement and subsequent reinstatement. So you said earlier that you don't think that this case will hold water. Why?
Look, my understanding of the charge sheet is that the PFMA is not strictly relevant to the charges that are against the minister. The minister is facing charges of fraud and theft, and those are common law crimes. As I said, the reason that we don't think the charges hold water is that the state will have to show that the minister intended to defraud the state and that he intended to prejudice the state, and we just don't see any evidence for that.
All right,
they also have to show that there was prejudice to the state, and we also just don't see evidence of any of that either.
Okay, let's just ask Francois whether you think that this case has got merit.
Well, I just want to say that it's not about just one man or just the one event, but it's that these events have been persistent, especially since 2009. And because of their persistent nature, we now have a fundamentally weaker rand and economy. That's why markets react, because there is less trust. Markets and credit agencies, they use analysts which use multiple variables, the judiciary just being one of these variables. They measure then the effectiveness of government and of government policies on the hand of GDP growth, which has been extremely lacking since 2008, 2009. They measure it on the impact of job creation, which is now at record high levels again. So in their perspective, looking at all these variables at their disposal, yes, judiciary is strong in South Africa, yes, SARS is strong in South Africa, yes, monetary policy is strong in South Africa, but this persistent short-term shocks is what costing the markets currently.
All right, besides the sentiment, though, there must be politics at play and not just your confidence in the procedure or the law taking its course. With this case, is it more about politics or is it more about the individual regarding the market sentiment?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not about the individual. It's because we have these individual events persistently over a long period of time that impacts fundamentalism in the economy. And that's why fundamentally we have a weaker economy and a weaker rand now.
Okay, let's, Alois, just your view. Franco's saying that it hasn't been about the individual necessarily, it's just that there has been volatility in that particular post of finance minister.
Yes, and it can't be, in my view, is that it can't be about an individual. It has to be about the due processes of the rule of law. That should, for me, prevail, because at the end of the day, we might end up having a system or a situation where we're saying, if you don't want to be charged in this country, therefore become the finance minister. I think that would be a very wrong way of doing business in our politics. But at the end of the day, the other issue is that you see, if we want to save the current situation in the name of trying to also save the economy that it will tumble and all those things. I mean, from a decolonial perspective, some people would argue that even in the current, even if the economy would be booming, there's the vast majority of black people here who are actually suffering, who are not even enjoying the benefits of the same economy that we are trying to save. So at the end of the day, we can't then say we should actually patronize this thing and make it an individual issue. This is about the rule of law, and this is a country with a constitution. Okay,
your reaction, Barry, to that?
No, I fully agree. It endorses what the panelists this side was suggesting initially, that the rule of law must be seen, justice must be seen to be served, and come the 2nd of November, that day will bring us something. Indeed, I'm interested in the facts put before by the NPA. As to whether it does warrant merit on their side to charge the minister.
Yeah, but the environment has been created that there is a certain level of victimization. Minister saying that his family, the summons was served while he was absent, and subsequently he was sought at Treasury. They couldn't find him there. What is the urgency of it all? And they could have taken it to his legal representatives.
Yeah, look, I think let's conclude by saying, first of all, let's call upon South Africans to stop being hypocritical, to stop liking agencies, Chapter 9 institutions and all, only when certain people are implicated or not implicated or what have you. South Africans must respect the institutions of our democracy all the time. This system has got checks and balances. The NPA doesn't just wake up and do stuff. They start with the Hawks. The Hawks do their investigation, and they take it to a point where they think that they have a case. Then they take it to the NPA. The NPA makes up its own mind if they've got enough evidence. I don't even think Pitt has done half the work. Pitt of the Helen Suzman Foundation, he has not even done half the work that the NPA has done to decide whether, because it's their whole credibility in line here, to decide whether they've got a prosecutable case or not. Work has been done. And this is why it is important. We also have another institution called the courts that is also going to reflect on these matters. Now, for public opinion, people sitting, not having read even one paragraph of anything, to be very opinionated about the details of the case, actually borders on being silly. We should not allow a situation like that.
Okay, but what do you base your arguments on then, Pete, when you're saying, again, Mzwanele is saying that, the NPA would have done due process to ensure that the prosecution is successful, and you're of the view that it doesn't hold water?
Look, of course, I agree that we must respect our institutions, but the fact that we must respect our institutions doesn't mean that we can't criticize what they do based on the evidence that we have available to us. And the evidence that we have available to us is the charge sheet and the summons that the minister has been presented with. And based on the evidence there, it does seem that the charges are flimsy. But we agree that we're going to see what happens when it gets to court, and we trust the courts will make the right decision.
Yeah, being flimsy or not, I mean, it's articulated well here in terms of the sequence of events, the fact that Ivan Pillay was granted early retirement at the cost of SARS to 1.1 million rand, which was endorsed by Finance Minister at the time, and so the charge sheet goes on. Do you think, Alois, not necessarily putting you in a spot here of trying to be a legal eagle, that we tend to, you know, we can't resist the allure of trying to be experts in areas that we don't know how they're going to turn out?
What is the question, Cindy?
No, I'm saying that in public opinion is such that we know better than what the experts do.
It's a difficult one, Cindy, but at the end of the day, I think the charge sheet for now, because I think what is confusing here is that
Zanele wants to respond on your behalf. You know that cases have been decided in the public domain. So let Zanele seems to be more vocal about these things. So the verdict is actually out before the trial. So Kabelo, you've been quiet for a while.
I think that's why my initial input was, I don't know what is in the docket, what is contained in the docket. So I want to restrain myself from commenting on the merits. I think the real test is when the case goes to court and we see what the NPA puts before the judiciary. As I said, the fact that the NPA has made a decision is not the end of the matter. There is a litmus test as to whether they've got a case or not, and that will play itself out in court. And unfortunately, if the decision is that there was no merit, then the NPA's credibility will be eroded away at that stage.
Yeah, but it's not something to be trivialized. I mean, with the charge sheet here, it says the offense of fraud that the three SARS officials were accused of, and accused number 3, rather, Finance Minister himself sitting with this. It is quite a serious charge that we cannot trivialize, Barry.
No, it is. But at the same time, the concern, and I was listening to radio as I was driving here, and one analyst was saying, why would an HR issue be made a criminal matter? Not to suggest, of course, that in HR domains, nothing criminal gets done. There are a whole lot of sets of criminal activities in that domain. It borders on issues that are in the public spotlight where, like I said initially, you have a high-ranking minister who gets involved and his integrity, in a sense, is put into the mud. Whether indeed that requires attention from the public in terms of suggestions and perceptions and bordering on public opinion, it's another matter. Let me agree with our legal expert here, that come the 2nd of November, let's hear both sides, tabling the facts on the table.
But also let's not have, sorry.
And look at the merits and the demerits from each side.
Yeah, I know Mzwanele studied this thoroughly.
Yeah, no, I haven't. No. But I think for me, I want to also appeal to South Africans to stop being hypocritical once again, because every day we say zero tolerance to corruption. Now, also as I was driving here, I hear all kinds of things about, I mean, what was R1 million? There are bigger things, you know, and yet we've got traffic cops that get nailed for 20 rand bribe. But that is too much. R1 million is nothing. This is just hypocrisy. I think this country would do good to be honest and also respect the rule of law, regardless of who is affected, and the fact that no one is above no minister, no president, nobody is above the law. I think sometimes this word is just said, people have not internalized it. And what they are doing now with all of this is almost like presenting somebody as an angel, that don't touch this angel, touch this angel, we're all gonna collapse. I mean, I was listening to Bruce Whitfield in a show. They say they bring an analyst in the show, he says, if he gets fired, then there will be catastrophe. I mean, really now, why catastrophe when we have policies in this country? So I think we should call upon even analysts, retired judges, especially retired judges, some of these retired judges, like the Yakubs of this world, they must act with restraint because they've got colleagues in the judicial system. I think we must be very clear that we know that people are not living in heaven. We're all living on earth. Therefore, retired judges carry a particular responsibility to make sure that they maintain the integrity of the judiciary. We can't have retired judges already making comments about the strengths and the weaknesses of cases that have not been tried in court. So they must act with restraint, these retired judges.
Okay, we've got that. Just very quickly, Kabelo, in wrapping in whether the RAND is being subservient to the law, or rather the economy is subservient to the law and not giving the space for legal processes to follow its course and rather focusing more on the impact and the catastrophe, as Mzwanele says, potentially on the economy.
Look, I don't want to become a politician, but I must say that I think Mr. Manyi has got a point that you cannot have a situation where the rule of law is going to be overlooked in certain respects just because of an individual who is involved. I believe that the rule of law is supreme and should take precedence no matter who is involved.
All right, Pete, just final words from you. The rule of law must remain supreme to anything else, and no individual is above the law. Your response to that?
No, of course that's true. And the minister will see his day in court and the courts will come to a decision. But respecting the rule of law doesn't mean that we can't comment on what we know about charges when we hear about them. But of course, the rule of law must be respected. Okay,
Alois, do you think we'll survive this one? We're not going to reach junk status as everybody's threatening?
I think the danger would be to actually conclude this thing before it goes to court. Because I think what is happening now is that people are looking at that charge sheet and they're actually thinking that the minister has been charged. The minister hasn't been charged, actually, he hasn't even gone to court. We've got a date that he has to go and appear and then get that charge sheet tested. At the end of the day, it is then that we're going to know then we can comment from then that whether we're going to have a junk state or not.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. That's Alois Baleni, a political analyst. Pete Olafir from the Helen Suzman Foundation. Barry Hanyane, political analyst. I should say professor, respectfully. And Mzwanele Manyi, Decolonization Foundation convener. And Gabelo Siabi, a lawyer. And thanks so much for Francois, who was on Skype with us as well. And for now, though, we take a quick ad break. We'll see you shortly.